The sky above Ouagadougou was heavy with dark clouds, the kind that threatened rain but carried a sense of foreboding beyond the weather. Inside a small, dimly lit military barracks, the rhythmic sound of boots against the floor echoed through narrow hallways. Young soldiers moved with precision, but one figure stood apart. Ibrahim Traoré, barely in his 30s, surveyed the room with sharp, calculating eyes. Every detail mattered, the maps pinned to the walls, the flickering radios transmitting news from across the nation, the murmurs of doubt among those around him. Traoré's journey had been anything but ordinary. Born into a country that often felt trapped between hope and despair, he had learned early that courage alone was not enough. Discipline, strategy, and an unwavering sense of justice were what truly separated those who lead from those who follow. He had seen the consequences of corruption firsthand, had watched as the vulnerable suffered while the powerful thrived. That knowledge burned inside him like fire, a fire that demanded action. He moved silently toward a worn wooden table at the center of the room, spreading out maps of the nation. Lines marked areas controlled by loyal forces, zones of unrest, and pockets where enemies hid, waiting to strike. Every mark represented a life, a town, a future at stake. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, but he welcomed it. Leadership, he knew, was never about comfort. It was about sacrifice. "Traoré," whispered a young lieutenant, approaching cautiously. "Are we ready?" "The reports. They say the opposition is planning something. Something big." Ibrahim's gaze remained fixed on the map, tracing routes with a finger. "Big or small," he said quietly, his voice calm but sharp. "We meet it the same way, with precision, courage, and without hesitation. If we wait, we lose more than battles. We lose the people's trust, and trust, once broken, is harder to rebuild than any city wall." Outside, the streets were quiet, but the air was tense. Civilians moved cautiously, aware that change was coming, though unsure what form it would take. Rumors of unrest had spread, and whispers of hope traveled faster than fear. Traoré knew that tonight could alter the nation's path forever. He had trained for moments like this, but training was nothing compared to the weight of reality, where a single decision could mean the difference between life and death for thousands. He straightened, calling for his closest officers to gather around. "Listen carefully," he said, voice firm, eyes blazing with intensity. "Tonight, we act. Not for glory, not for ourselves, but for the people who cannot fight for themselves. Every move we make must be deliberate. Every choice must be precise. Hesitation is a luxury we cannot afford." As the officers nodded in solemn agreement, Traoré allowed himself a brief moment to reflect. He remembered the villages he had visited, children with hopeful eyes, elders who had endured decades of neglect, families longing for justice. This was more than a mission. This was a responsibility, a calling that demanded everything he had and more. The first raindrops began to fall, splattering against the roof. In that moment, the storm outside mirrored the storm inside the nation. Chaos and uncertainty, fear and determination, doubt and hope, all colliding. And at the center of it, standing tall, was Ibrahim Traoré, not yet a hero in the eyes of the world, but already a beacon of courage for those who believed in him. He turned to his officers. "Tonight, we make history. And when the people look back years from now, they will remember that when the nation needed someone to rise, someone did. Let that someone be us." The room fell silent, the weight of the words hanging in the air. Then, with a resolute nod, Traoré signaled the beginning of the operation. Outside, the rain intensified, but inside, a spark had ignited, the spark of a leader ready to change the course of history. Night had fallen like a heavy curtain over Ouagadougou. The streets, usually alive with chatter and commerce, were silent, the only sounds coming from the distant rumble of thunder and the soft rustle of leaves in the storm. Within a nondescript building at the edge of the city, Ibrahim Traoré and his closest officers were huddled around a dim table, maps and intelligence reports spread before them. Each sheet, each scribbled note held secrets that could tip the balance between chaos and order. "Sir," whispered Lieutenant Kabore, voice barely audible over the storm, "our informants confirm that the opposition is planning an attack on several key positions tomorrow. It's massive. If we don't act first, they could destabilize the entire region." Traoré's eyes narrowed. He leaned over the table, tracing the routes with a steady finger. "Massive or not, they underestimate us. Every time they plot in shadows, we shine a light. Every move they make, we anticipate. Tonight, we show them that courage and strategy outweigh fear and deception." One of the officers, visibly tense, asked, "But sir, the risk is enormous. If even one unit fails, the consequences?" Ibrahim cut him off, voice firm but calm. "Consequences exist whether we act or hesitate. Inaction is the greater enemy. Every life we protect, every village we defend begins with us deciding to stand, not retreat. Fear is a choice. Courage is a duty. With a decisive motion, he outlined the operation. Teams would move silently under cover of darkness, securing strategic checkpoints before dawn. Contingency plans were drawn for every possible scenario. Each officer listened intently, absorbing the weight of responsibility that Traoré carried alone. As they finalized the plans, Traoré's mind wandered briefly, not to fear, but to purpose. He remembered the faces of citizens in towns previously neglected, of children whose schools had crumbled, and families who had no one to protect them. This mission was about more than strategy. It was about restoring hope to a people who had almost forgotten what it felt like. Hours passed. Rain soaked the city, creating slick streets that reflected the dim light of sporadic lamps. Traoré led his troops through narrow alleys and dense forests, moving silently, the storm masking their movements. Every step was precise, every gesture calculated. His soldiers, inspired by his calm authority, followed without question. Then came the moment of confrontation. At a small bridge outside the city, opposition forces had set up a blockade, intending to ambush anyone who dared approach. Traoré signaled his team to halt, assessing the terrain. The enemy, confident in their numerical advantage, had underestimated the resolve of a man who carried the weight of a nation's hope. "Remember," Traoré whispered to his closest unit, "our strength is not just in numbers, but in unity, discipline, and the will to protect the innocent. Strike only when necessary, but strike with precision. Let them feel our resolve before they see us." A tense silence fell. Then, with a coordinated movement, Traoré's forces advanced, flanking the opposition from both sides. Bullets tore through the air, shouts echoed in the storm, and the ground shook beneath the chaos. Yet amid the fear, Traoré remained focused, issuing commands with clarity and calm authority. By dawn, the operation was a success. The opposition had been neutralized, strategic points secured, and civilians in nearby towns safeguarded. News of the daring nighttime raid spread quickly. For the people, it was more than a tactical victory. It was a symbol that someone was willing to risk everything for their safety, their future, and their freedom. Back at headquarters, Traoré stood alone on a balcony, rain dripping from his shoulders, watching the first light of day touch the city. He allowed himself a brief moment of reflection, knowing that this was only the beginning. The road ahead was fraught with danger, enemies, and impossible choices. But if courage, intelligence, and determination could turn the tide tonight, then perhaps, just perhaps, the nation had a chance at a new dawn. "Tonight," he whispered to himself, voice barely audible over the wind, "we've not just fought an enemy. We've shown the people that one determined leader can stand against the darkness, and we will not stop." The sun rose over Ouagadougou, casting golden light across streets that had been silent in fear only hours before. But the city was not asleep. Word of Ibrahim Traoré's bold nighttime operation had spread, and with it, hope. People peeked from windows, children ran through the streets laughing for the first time in years, and shopkeepers opened doors that had long remained closed. Traoré walked among them, no longer just a soldier or officer, but a presence that radiated courage and resolve. His boots splashed in puddles from the overnight storm, but he hardly noticed. Each handshake, each nod, each word he exchanged was a promise that he would not abandon them, that he would fight for them, and that he would never stop seeking justice. In the nearby village of Koka, he spoke to elders whose homes had been neglected for decades. "I am not here to lead for my own sake," he said, voice steady but filled with warmth. "I am here to serve, to protect, and to ensure that every child, every family, and every citizen knows that their lives, their dreams, and their dignity matter." The elders looked at him, eyes wide, a mixture of disbelief and newfound trust. One of them, trembling, asked, "How can one man fight such powerful forces alone?" Traoré smiled gently. "I am not alone. The people, the brave hearts willing to rise, the honest and courageous, they are with me. Together, we are stronger than any threat, greater than any fear." As days turned into weeks, Traoré's leadership became legendary. He coordinated reconstruction efforts, reopened schools, and ensured access to essential services in neglected towns. He listened to the people's stories, each tale of struggle reinforcing his determination. And while enemies still plotted in shadows, their schemes were consistently outmaneuvered by Traoré's intelligence, foresight, and unwavering commitment. One evening, standing atop a hill overlooking the city, Traoré reflected on how far he had come. The rain of the past weeks had left the city sparkling, streets glistening like silver, and children playing where fear had once reigned. He knew that leadership was not a position of comfort, but a burden of responsibility. Yet every challenge, every sacrifice, every sleepless night was worth it for the smiles he saw and the lives he touched. He turned to his officers beside him. "Remember this," he said, voice carrying over the wind. "Power is meaningless if it is not used to protect, to uplift, and to serve. Leadership is not for the few, but for all. And we will continue to fight, to strive, and to build a nation that stands as a beacon of hope. The officers nodded, inspired not only by his words, but by the courage he embodied. Beyond them, across the city, the people sensed the change. Fear had not vanished completely, but it had been replaced with determination. Hope was no longer a whisper. It was a roar, echoing through every street, every home, and every heart. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson, Traoré looked toward the future. He knew that the road ahead would bring new challenges, but he also knew that a nation guided by courage, justice, and unwavering leadership could withstand anything. And so, the legend of Ibrahim Traoré was cemented, not just as a soldier or a leader, but as a champion of the people. A man who stood against corruption, fear, and injustice, and illuminated a path toward hope, unity, and resilience. His story became more than history. It became inspiration, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, a single determined heart can ignite the light of change.